after an inspired win against the Leafs. Can the Habs make the playoffs? Also, we're going to be talking about Kotkaniemi and Hudon, what they're doing down in Laval. That and much, much more coming up on the Habsnation Podcast. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt. Welcome to the Sin Bin Network, and you are watching the Habsnation Podcast. The podcast every Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Times, where we just talk about the Canadiens. You know, any topic that comes to mind, most likely in the past week, or so, we're going to be talking about it because, look, I'm a fan. You guys are fans. We're fans talking. And speaking about talking, if you guys have any sort of questions or any sort of topics you guys want to talk about, just go ahead and write it in the chat and we'll discuss it and we'll have some fun. Also, if you guys don't really like writing, you're more into talking, make sure to follow the link in the description and go to the Discord, because if you go on the Sin Bin official Discord, you would be able to go on the voice channel, wait in the waiting room, and I would be able to bring you onto the stream and we could have a voice chat. But if you guys don't like that, just commenting and writing down the question, that's good enough. So, like I said, this is the Habs podcast. We're going to talk about everything Canadiens. And in the past week, I think I canceled last week. So in the past 2 weeks, all right, there's been a lot of events, okay? But I like to start every week the same way and just giving a quick look at the standings here. So if you guys would just stick out with me and look at the standings, because it's pretty important for a team that's in the hunt for the playoffs. So as of right now, in the Eastern Conference, because that's really what we're looking at, right, being Habs fans, in the Atlantic, Boston leads. I don't think that's going to be for very long because Tampa, they're right behind them, and they're coming with fury, and they look like the Tampa of old. So, but right now, Boston is still on top. Right after that, we got Tampa, and we got the aforementioned Toronto Maple Leafs. We're going to get to them a little bit later, but if we scroll a little bit further down, we see, I pressed on the button. Well, if we were to scroll a little bit further down, we would see the New York Islanders. Come on, NHL. Come on, computer. Come on. Okay. Here. Oh, my fucking God. Why can't anything fucking work anymore? I'm trying to be professional. All right. We see the New York Islanders. They have 53 games played and 68 points. We see the Carolina Hurricanes. They have 55 games played. They have 67 points. Now, if we're to skip a little bit down here, and I'll try not to click on it, we see the Montreal Canadiens. They're sitting in the 5th position, outside of the playoffs, and they have 61 points in 57 games. Now, I watched the Toronto games. I actually went to La Cage au Sport. Not a fan of it. It was only my second time, but I wasn't really that big a fan of it. I don't know, there's like kids throwing popcorn everywhere, and it's just not the ambiance. Is that the word? It's not the ambiance I was expecting, sort of. But I watched the Maple Leafs game, and I would say it's a really, really good game. They played really some inspired hockey. They really did. And listening to TSN Radio and listening to all of the Habs fans, the discussion is, hey, are the Habs back in the playoff race? Kovalchuk is on fire. Suzuki's on fire. We're going to get to him a little bit later. But are the Habs really in the playoff race? When I look back at the standings, and I will here, there's one main problem that sort of jumps to my eyes, and that is the number of games played. Montreal currently has 57 games played, and they only have 61 points. All right. For example, the New York Rangers, they have 53 games played, which is four less than the Canadiens, and they have 56 points. So if they were to win maybe 3 out of the 4 games, the New York Rangers, they leapfrog over the Canadiens. I'll be the first one to say, and I know I sound like a broken record, we're all hoping for the miracle story, right? We're all hoping for the scenario that goes like this. The Canadiens, they're out of the playoffs by the All-Star break, but they turn things around, they get a few key players back from injury, and they manage to make it into the playoffs. Is that realistic? No, but the more I look at it, and the more from what I'm hearing, if you guys want to see Petrie traded for some assets, that's not going to happen. If you guys want to see Tatar being traded for some assets, that's also not going to happen. From what I heard, I think that was from Elliot Friedman. Why is it not going to happen? Bergevin thinks the Canadiens have a legitimate chance to make it into the playoffs, and therefore he wants to keep the Tatars and keep the Petries. I personally think that's a huge gamble, and I'm afraid to say that I don't think that's a gamble that's going to pay off. But that doesn't matter because Joe's in the chat. Joe, where have you been, buddy? You ditching me for that girlfriend of yours? He says Hudon and Kotkaniemi are doing extremely well together on the first line. But unfortunately, the goaltending has taken a dip. A lot of people are calling for Kincaid's head. I feel bad for him. Yep, a couple of games against the Belleville Senators, Kincaid wasn't amazing. And as much as I liked Keith Primo, God, that's his dad, Caden Primo, as much as I liked him at the NHL level, he hasn't been totally amazing with the Laval Rocket. There's many reasons for that. I don't think it's necessarily because Caden Primo is a bad goalie. The reason why I view a lot of this, where a goalie does poorly in the AHL, and then they come up to the NHL, and it's like their career rejuvenated. You know, for example, I think Binnington was one of those, where he doesn't have the best AHL numbers, but once he came to the NHL, boom. And I got to attribute that to the fact that maybe the systems in the AHL, it's not always the best in terms of the defensive systems. You go up to the NHL, you got some defensemen that can make you look good. And that's why I think that Caden Primo looks really good at the NHL level. But if we were going to get into it, like Joe said, why don't we talk a little bit about Kotkaniemi? Because he was sent down to Laval Rocket. A lot of people weren't surprised. A lot of people were disappointed. This was sort of a move that I was expecting, and I'll go a step further. I think it should have been done a while ago. Okay? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Kotkaniemi was not ready at 18 years old to play in the NHL. And I know a lot of you're staring at your computer screen, 8 people listening, which isn't bad for me. You're staring at your computer screen, you're saying, what do you know, you fat Arab? Have you ever played hockey? Have you ever analyzed? I'm going off of what a lot of people are saying. Okay, Saku Koivu, probably the best captain I've ever seen played for the Montreal Canadiens. When asked if it was smart to play Kotkaniemi as an 18-year-old, he flat out said no. He said, this isn't an 18-year-old's league, unfortunately. You know, it's hard for an 18-year-old to play on different levels. First of all, you don't have the physical frame, right? And we saw that when he got crushed by Jadorov. Okay, he just doesn't have the physical frame. Second of all, you got to adjust to playing to the NHL. Now, I'm going to give you guys an example, and I know this has got nothing to do with the NHL, but I laced up the skates for a first time in a while here because I got to admit, when I'm studying here in the States, I don't get to play a leaky bum. I don't get to play hockey much. I went and played in the Canadian rinks, and I'm telling you, those Quebec hockey players, you know, the kids in my neighborhood, they're on a different level. I don't know what the parents are putting in their hamburger helpers, but they're skating on a different level, and I had trouble adjusting to the speed. Maybe I should have played with the little kids, get adjusted, and then I'll skip to the superstars. Now, when I see Kotkaniemi, I feel like we skipped steps, and those steps being sending him back to Laval, or I should say back to Finland, sending him to Laval. Those are steps that should have been taken a long time ago. If you're from Quebec, you're going to get this analogy, but when we're done high school, what happens next? We go to Cégep. Cégep, in case there's any people from Ontario or outside of Quebec, it's sort of a level between college and high school. So we finish high school, we go to Cégep, then maybe we go to university, get our graduate's degree, and then maybe we do some more years and we get our doctorate's degree. It's like a sequence, you know? Now, imagine I finish high school and then I go into med school. Hey, I'm going to kill someone. You know, that's what I sort of feel like we did with Kotkaniemi. He finished high school, or Finland, and we sent him right off to the NHL. All right, so I kind of beat a dead horse here, but I do have some good news, which I will get to in a second. But first, let me read some questions because I do tend to forget to read some questions here. Alvin was here, says, Montreal won't make it. Another 15th overall pick. Hey, man, I'm trying to be optimistic here, but it's sort of looking more and more like that, unfortunately. It's sort of looking like it's going to be a 15th overall pick, and I hate to say that, but one thing I must admit, in Montreal, Marc Bergevin is an extremely stubborn GM. When it's Marc Bergevin, It's his way or the highway. Mark Bergevin has it in his head that the Canadiens can legitimately make it to the playoffs. So he's going to make a push, and he's going to hold on to every player, whether it be Tatar, whether it be Petrie, whether it be Price, Weber, anyone. He's going to hold on to it because he has it in his head that they can make the playoffs. I wish he would sit down with a statistician and look at the stats, because the stats reveal that he's pretty far from the playoffs. Unfortunately, again, it pains me to say this being a Canadiens fan, but he's pretty far from the playoffs. If you ask me, I think the hair gel went to his brain because he's thinking nonsense. Joe says, I think there's a chance for us to make the playoffs. I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility. I just hope we keep Covey. He's such a monster of a player. You know what? The more I look at Covey, who had that excellent goal against Toronto, the overtime winner. And what to say about that celly? Game over. That was an incredible celly. Anyway, the more I look at Kovalchuk, the more he reminds me of Alexander Radulov. When the Canadiens signed Radulov, a lot of people didn't like it. They were saying, we're complaining about an attitude issue and we get a guy like Radulov? A lot of people, they were scratching their heads. I personally loved it. And then when he played that first season with Montreal, a lot of people changed their minds. When I look at Kovalchuk, I see a lot of Radulov. Maybe I'm just saying that because they're both Russian and they came from the KHL. But when I look at their work ethic, when I look at the passion, when I look at the type of celebrations when they score, just that passion that oozes out, I think of Radulov. Now, let me just cross my fingers and hope Kovalchuk won't do what Radulov did and ditch the team that brought him into the NHL out of the KHL for another team that's willing to offer a little bit more money. I hope it's not a money situation, because I'll tell you what, Canadiens fans, when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens and free agency, it's an uphill battle because we are fighting a tax situation, and I've said this for years and I'll continue on saying this. There should be a way to adjust it. You know, the salary cap, Montreal should have a little bit of leeway because they do have a higher tax situation, and I don't think that's encouraging much parity in this league. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. I love Kovalchuk. I love the passion he brings, and if the Canadiens, in my opinion, had a legitimate shot to making the playoffs and maybe even the cup, I would be saying, hey, Kovalchuk, I'm all on board, let's keep him. But since I pretty much know deep down in my heart they're probably not going to make the playoffs, I wouldn't be opposed to trading him. If he continues this pace, you can get maybe a second round pick, a B grade prospect. And I said this with Tatar, and I'll say it again with Kovalchuk. When he's done his contract, say we trade him to, I'm making up a team, it's not a rumor or anything, say we trade Kovalchuk to Pittsburgh, who need a winger after Jay Guntaz went down. He plays with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He goes to the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe he even wins the cup. Why doesn't Montreal sign him after? You know, you can trade and sign. Pretty similar to what we did with Plekanec. I think what they did with Plekanec was a very calculated move, and it was very smart. I think that on a bigger scale, they can do that with Kovalchuk. So I hope that answers your question. Leaky Bum says Habs are wasting their time trying to go for the playoffs. They should have unloaded some players for picks and prospects and go for a top pick this year and a loaded draft. I absolutely agree. And I don't know if you guys have been listening to the past podcasts. If you haven't, then please jump on board to that. They're really good episodes. But I think I've been saying that every episode. They should definitely, at this point, I think it's easier to go for the last pick than go for the playoffs. Mathematically speaking, of course. You know, they should completely go because trying to win these games, it's a huge gamble, because if you don't make the playoffs, you're just crapping your draft position. You're just making your draft position worse. So it's kind of a disappointment. And what's more of a disappointment is that this draft is in Montreal. Imagine getting a top 5 pick in Montreal and the fans' reaction. You know, imagine getting Lafreniere. It probably won't happen. You know, that you're going to have to be very lucky when it comes to the lottery. But imagine drafting Lafreniere in Montreal. I mean, that should be something else. Lee goes on. He says, if Montreal makes the playoffs, it will be because of Kovalchuk. They need his skill. Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't be opposed if he wants to sign at the end of the year, with all depending on the contract, how much money he wants and the term. Because as much as we're on board for Kovalchuk, let's remind ourselves, this is still a very short sample size here, right? He's been with the team, 10 games? So let's not give him a huge contract over just 10 games, but I would be on board for signing him at the end of the year. Speaking of the Plekanec trade, Joe says, I thought we should have done more with Kirby Reichel. I think he's a great player, and I thought he would have done well as one of our bottom 6 players. When Kirby Reichel was drafted by the Columbus Blue Jackets, I believe it was in 2014. Someone please fact check me. I'm too cheap to pay an actual fact checker. But no, when the Columbus Blue Jackets drafted Kirby Reichel, he was expected to be more than a bottom 6 player, I'll tell you. He was expected to be a top 6 player, sort of in the vein of a Brendan Gallagher. Those were the rumblings I was getting when they first drafted Kirby Reichel. We ended up getting him from Toronto, but I remember back when he was with Columbus, the Montreal Canadiens were in on Kirby Reichel. They were very interested in Kirby. Unfortunately, it hasn't really worked out. I don't know who to blame, whether it be the teams he was on, they didn't develop him properly, or whether it's the player himself, but I remember Kirby Reichel was an interesting prospect, and it's sort of sad what's happening, but I'm sure he's making a lot of dough in the AHL, and I'm sure that's a lot of fun anyway. So guys, write in your question, and reminder to join the Sinbin official server on Discord. I wanted to talk about something here. I'll answer your questions. Let me just get to this one topic, because it kind of floored me. There's this reporter, you guys may have heard of him. He sometimes does appearances on TSN 690 with Tony Marinaro. His name is Norma Flynn. This is his photo. Sorry I couldn't get a better quality photo, but this guy Norma Flynn, I always loved him. Whenever he's on Tony, he's on pretty much every week. I make sure to watch that episode, and I really take his opinion with a lot of confidence, the confidence that he knows what he's talking about. He put out this trade proposition. I think he had originally said it on Notre Chambre on RDS, and it really floored me, if I gotta be honest. He proposed to trade Cole Caulfield. Now, I already lost a lot of you guys just saying that he wants to trade Cole Caulfield. Wait until you hear who he wanted to trade him for. Norma Flynn of RDS and TSN thinks that the Canadiens should trade Cole Caulfield for Kyle Palmieri. Yeah. I'm excited to hear your guys' opinion, but I gotta say, that is a ridiculous trade proposition. I like Kyle Palmieri enough. Ever since he was with the Ducks, I liked him. He's an honest player. He's got a lot of leadership. I liked it earlier on this season when Jack Hughes got hit behind the net by Niskanen, and Kyle Palmieri came to his player's defense and dropped the gloves with Niskanen. I like that. He shows leadership. He scored 30 goals once, and that was 4 years ago. He's 29 years old. Cole Caulfield, he's obviously very young. He's not even 20 yet. And if we project him to score 40 goals maybe 30 goals. If everything goes okay, he'll score 40 goals. You're going to give up all of that youth and all of that talent for Kyle Palmieri? What's wrong with your brains? No, look, I like Norma Flynn, and I'm sort of joking here because I'll still keep listening to him, and I really like his opinions on everything. He's obviously a very knowledgeable person. But Cole Caulfield for Kyle Palmieri, and he goes on saying the Devils would want a guy like Caulfield because of that experience he's had with Jack Hughes back in the minors. But what are the Canadiens getting out of this? Kyle Palmieri? Maybe I would understand this if the Canadiens were a Kyle Palmieri away from winning the Cup. If somehow I have a crystal ball and I see if the Canadiens acquire Kyle Palmieri, they get the Stanley Cup, then I would say, yeah, sure, take Cole Caulfield. But I severely doubt that's the case. Mark Bergevin, if you're listening, do not trade Cole Caulfield for Kyle Palmieri, someone who's nearly 10 years older than him and who probably will never score as much goals as him. Please do not do that, okay? That was something else, I must say. With all due respect to Norm Flynn, I still really much like him. Moving on to the chat, and why don't we? Let's see. Where was I? All right, Maya Butriix. I've never seen you before, so welcome, Maya. She says, Lee, I totally disagree with you. You are an idiot. Your name sounds like Leaky Bomb. I think that was the joke there. Joe says, we traded him for Hunter Shinkruk, another player who I thought was very talented, who I thought we should have kept a little bit longer because I thought he would have developed a little bit with us. All right, similarly to what I said about Kirby Reichel, it's sort of the same with Hunter Shinkruk. I can't remember if he was drafted by Calgary or Vancouver. It was either one of them, and he ended up getting traded to the other team. But I remember when he first got drafted, this guy was viewed as a guy with a lot of speed, a lot of skill. He was viewed as the next best thing. But what I will tell you, Joe, is that having skill in this league, it's not enough. It's not enough to have just skill. Otherwise, Nikita Scherbak would be on the team right now. He'd probably be ripping 30 goals a year. Unfortunately, it's not enough to have just that raw skill. You have to have the work ethic, and you have to have what it takes to make it to the NHL. And unfortunately, guys like Hunter Shinkruk and guys, I don't know if I'm saying that right, guys like Kirby Reichel, I don't know if it was always the case with them. But anyway, Fedge says, hey, Matt, I'm late to the game tonight. Are we in it? Yeah, absolutely. What game are we talking about? Areem says, what kind of shit trade is that? Yeah, tell me about it. I know a lot of people on Twitter, they weren't really happy about that trade. They were not happy at all. Leaky Bum says, listen here. Oh, we got a fight going on. Oh my God. I better get out my popcorn. Listen here, little Miss Betrayus. If you think Montreal is making If you think Montreal is making the playoffs, you are the problem with Habs fans. That would be a terrible trade for Bergevin. He would be fired on the spot. Hey, I guess we've seen crazier, but if you guys look it up, that's actually something he proposed. I think it was on L'Antichambre or something like that, but anyway. Leaky Bum says, or rather, Joe says, Kyle Palmieri. I mean, the guy's a great player, but... sorry, I lost it. Shit. The guy's a great player, but first of all, our players hate the guy, especially Price. That's true. That is absolutely true. No, Carey Price. Remember that game against New Jersey? I think it was 2 years ago. Kyle Palmieri came barreling down into Price, and he gave him like blocker shots right into the kidneys. But if I were to tell you, I think that what's happened on the ice, I don't think the players take it personally. If you were to ask me that question, I think it's sort of water off a duck's back. I don't think he would hold a grudge, but nevertheless, that's a shit trade, if I might say so myself. Fedgehead says, yes, I would do that trade. Maybe add a pick or the backup goalie. Oh, I don't know about that. Alexi is in the chat. He says, hey, what's up, buddy? Alvin was here, says, Caulfield for Palmieri. The man is smoking way, way too much. He's the same dude that wanted to trade Suzuki for Mark Stone. Like I said, Price and Weber are the reason why this team can. Well, you said can, but I'm assuming he meant can't. Price and Weber are the reason why this team can't rebuild. Listen, Marc Bergevin, you know when I said he's stubborn? I meant it. He's an absolutely stubborn bastard, Marc Bergevin. If you want to win in this league, all right, if you want to have success, you either go for the cup or you go for the last position. You either succeed or you go for the first overall pick and rebuild. What does Marc Bergevin do? He does neither. He wouldn't even say rebuild. I think he said reset. Okay, guys, we're going to do a reset. It's not a rebuild. You know, fuck your reset. Fuck it in your ass. Because what that tells me, reset, it means we want a movement of youth. We want to bring in that youth. We want to get the last position. But at the same time, we want to keep Weber and Price. He wants his cake, and he wants to eat it too. That's not how you're going to win. That's my opinion. Obviously, I'm not the Montreal GM, and for a reason. But if I look at the best teams in the NHL, they're there because of drafting, maybe a few key free agent signings. Marc Bergevin wants his cake, and he wants to eat it too. And judging by the looks of it, it's a shit cake. Leaky Bum says, Matt, would you have traded Hall for Caulfield at the beginning of the year? Nope, and I'll tell you why. For two reasons, first of all. One is more of a technical reason. Hall's a free agent at the end of the year. Hall's going to go to the team that A, attracts him the most, and B, is going to give him the most money. It's not guaranteed that Montreal is that team. You're going to give up Caulfield, who may or may not be an elite player on this team, an elite goal-scoring winger. You're going to give him off for having Taylor Hall for 1 year? I'm not going to do that. Now, pretend Taylor Hall, he was like on a 5-year contract right now. If you're asking me, then it's a different story. But since Taylor Hall's a UFA at the end of the year, I am not jumping onto that. And my second reason, and this is more of an opinion based, and you guys can disagree with me, in which case I would love to know why. I'm not a fan of Taylor Hall. You know what? I'll tell you one thing. Every team that Taylor Hall's been on, whether it be when he was on those edition of the Edmonton Oilers, whether it be when he was on the New Jersey Devils, they had trouble making it out of the first round. And he sort of gained this reputation of being a bad team player. I'm not totally sold on him. He sort of strikes me as a moody player. I'm speculating a little bit. I don't have any facts to back this up. But I think that if you look at Taylor Hall and his stats, he's a max 30 goal scorer. And he's a left winger, which isn't as valuable for the Canadiens at this point anyway, as a center or defenseman. I wouldn't do it. I'm not the biggest Taylor Hall fanboy, so I'm just going to say that, so take it with a grain of salt. Alvin was here. He says, and I'd like to know what that name means, by the way. Alvin was here. Is it a reference to Alvin and the Shitmonks? Alvin was here says, the got to rush players like Paling and KK. Both players are not used to playing in 82 games a season, and now I have a feeling Caulfield will be the next player to get rushed. I hope they learn their lessons with Caulfield, but that's absolutely true. If you look at the prospect right now in the Canadiens that's doing great, what's the name that comes to mind? Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki is doing great with the Canadiens, and listening to the radio, reading articles, a big reason of why Nick Suzuki is doing great is because last year he played a full year in the OHL. Now, not only did he play a full year in the OHL, but he played 100-plus games because his Guelph Storm, the team he was playing with, they ended up making a deep run in the playoffs. They even won the trophy, whatever it's called, the Memorial Cup or whatever the trophy is called. They ended up winning it. All right? He has 100-plus games under his belt. So what does that do? Remember last year when Kotkaniemi, a lot of people were pleased with his play in the first half of the season. Personally, I was pleased, but I wasn't like overly impressed. I was sort of like whatever. Once he hit the halfway mark, he sort of hit a wall. He got tired. If you look at Nick Suzuki, because he played all of those games in junior, because his team went to the playoffs and he has 100-plus games, he's not hitting that wall. He's better conditioned. And did you guys see that game against Anaheim? Did you see how he absolutely walked Hampus Lindholm? Holy shit, this guy is going to be special. And, if I were to compare him to Kotkaniemi, they're two very different players. I understand. At this point in time, I gotta say, I think Suzuki's the more promising player. Forget the fact that Kotkaniemi was drafted 3rd and Suzuki was drafted, 13th or whatever it was. Forget all of that. I think Suzuki is the better player. I'll go a step further. I think currently he might be their best prospect. Definitely top 2, maybe top 3. He might be the best prospect in their system. I don't think I've ever seen a player this promising in all of my years. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he ended up playing 2 extra years in junior after getting drafted. This is proven to be beneficial. You know, I know a lot of you guys out there, a player gets drafted, and you guys want to see him right off, you guys want to see him help the team. What's the best draft? You know, if you ask the experts, they'll say that this draft was the best draft in all of the years of the NHL. I'm talking about the 2003 NHL draft. If you guys don't recall, that was a draft where Perry got drafted, Ryan Getzlav, Zach Parise, Shea Weber, Dustin Byfuglien, all of these big names, they came out of the 2003 draft. They're starting to say that the reason why that draft class was so solid, it's not so much because of the individual players. It's not so much because they were talented. If you guys recall, that was the year where the NHL had a lockout. So a lot of those players got sent back down to junior. They're starting to say that maybe that's the reason why these players were so successful. They benefited from that extra year of junior. Again, you're not going to go right off from high school to engineering school or medical school. No, you have to do a few undergrad classes. You have to go to Cégep. It's no coincidence that Suzuki is doing amazing and he played 2 extra years in junior. All right. But to be honest, Leaky Bum, to answer your question, because I did kind of go on a tangent there, I don't think the Canadiens would play Caulfield at the beginning of the year. Okay? I think they learned, personally, I think they learned their lesson with Kotkaniemi. They don't want another problem like that. They don't want another controversy, for lack of a better word. I doubt they will do the same thing with Caulfield. And one thing going for them, God damn it, what's the word? One thing supporting Caulfield going back to junior is that he's not the biggest player. All right? They could have made the argument when Kotkaniemi was first in that first training camp. They could have said, well, he's 6'2". You know, he's going to learn to survive. That's not the case with Caulfield. Caulfield is knee-high to a grasshopper. That's one thing supporting bringing him back down to the maybe Laval. Maybe if he's still of age, bringing him back to the NCAA. You know, we'll wait and see. But again, I doubt they'll play Caulfield again. Alvin was here, says... okay. Fedgehead says, Caulfield is overrated by the fans and underrated by the league, hence being available at 15. You know what? Maybe you're right. I think a lot of us fans, we pretend to know where these players project. It's an extremely hard thing to do. You have to be part gypsy to know where these players would project. For example, when Suzuki first got drafted, a lot of people were saying he's a second-line center or winger, whatever. Now that he's had almost 1 year under his belt, I think a lot of those people would change their minds. Me personally, I think that he's a bona fide superstar. You know, Max Kossi, not to get ahead in the questions, but yeah, I do think he's a bona fide superstar. And first of all, what is a superstar? Is it someone who's going to score 120 points a year? Not necessarily. You know, for me, a superstar, it's not so much in the stats as it is in the impact he has on the game. You know, I think that Suzuki, the impact he has on the game, it speaks louder than the amount of points that he has. And that's why I really hope the NHL looks at him for the Calder Trophy, because even though he might not have as much points as a guy like Victor Olofsson, I do think that the impact he's having on their team, I think that Suzuki is doing a little bit of a better job. So I do think he's a bona fide superstar. Hopefully. We'll see how things turn out. Maya Boutrix, I don't know if I'm saying that right. She says, wow, Mr. Mr. Leaky Bum. You are the problem with Habs fan. You are just a poop head. All right, there we go. Calm down, children. Calm down. Do I need to get a moderator for you guys? Areem says, yeah, the dude's a stud. I don't know if you're talking about Suzuki or whether you're talking about me, but hey, I'll take the compliment. Leaky Bum says, poophead, really? Are you going to tell the teacher on the end? All right, kids. Max Kossi says, reset means patching holes. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not buying it. For me, what he meant by reset is that he wants to rebuild, but at the same time, he doesn't want to give up with Shea Weber and Carey Price. For some reason, Marc Bergevin has the biggest hard-on for Shea Weber and Carey Price. I think if you offered Kucherov and Point and Hedman for Shea Weber, I don't think that Marc Bergevin would pull the trigger. For some reason, he has the biggest hard-on for them. So when he says reset, it means I'm rebuilding, but hey, I'm not rebuilding. Reset equals middle of the pack. Exactly. It means I don't want to be first and I don't want to be last. Reset. Joe says, I like Marc Bergevin, but personally when he speaks, I think he sounds like a French Triple H. Absolutely. I don't even know it's a Triple H, but I agree. One thing that I've seen about Marc Bergevin is that he does contraindicate himself a lot. He has the tendency to contraindicate himself. For example, what's that you see written on top on the wall in the corner there? No excuses. If you look at every Marc Bergevin press conference, it's excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse. Well, this player was injured, and this player was injured, and he's coming off this, and na. And what happened to no excuses? Anyway, Fedge says, Suzuki equals Koivu, no more, no less. Maybe. I'm trying to watch my words here, because I did see Koivu, but it was sort of in his later years. I think I only saw 2 years of Koivu. So, but just based on those 2 years, I don't think Koivu had as much raw skill as Nick Suzuki. Again, just look at that play against Anaheim, where Nick Suzuki walked Hampus Lindholm. Hampus Lindholm is no slouch. He's one of their top defensemen. And I get it, it's the Anaheim Ducks, so take that for what it's worth, but he is one of their top defensemen. Based on those 2 years of watching Saku Koivu, I don't think that he would be able to do something like that. Now, with that being said, Saku Koivu brought things that Nick Suzuki probably won't bring. The leadership, the work ethic, Saku Koivu was the best at that. Again, he's probably the best captain I've ever seen on the Montreal Canadiens. You think it's Pacioretty? Fuck no. So maybe he ends up to be a Koivu. But hey, that's a win. If you trade, because, again, speaking of Pacioretty, he was involved in that trade. If you trade Pacioretty for Koivu, I'd do that trade any day of the week. Any day of the week. Any day of the day. Speaking about trades, when people, they're wondering the value of Thomas Tatar. Okay? They're wondering what you can get with the Thomas Tatar. If you guys recall, when he got traded from the Detroit Red Wings to the Vegas Golden Knights, do you guys remember the price that the Vegas Golden Knights gave? A first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a third-round pick. Those are counted 3 draft picks for Tatar, who, let the record show, the season he was having over there in Detroit wasn't as good as his current season right now. If I'm not mistaken, he is on pace for record numbers. Again, the trade deadline, teams feel I am a Thomas Tatar away from winning the cup. And therefore, they are willing to give the kitchen sink for a guy like Thomas Tatar. So when I say that Marc Bergevin is doing an extremely risky move, holding on to these types of guys, because he thinks he can make it to the playoffs. If you don't make it to the playoffs, I want his head on a silver platter. Figuratively speaking, I don't want to kill the guy, obviously. But imagine a first, a second, and a third for Thomas Tatar. Someone fact check me, but I believe that's what it was. Imagine what you can get for him this season. Maybe it's a first, a second, and another second the following year. Maybe it's a first and a first. We don't know. We don't know. My point is, look at the market. Do you feel like the Canadiens have a legitimate chance to winning the cup? Most people don't say they have a chance of making the playoffs. Why not trade a guy like Thomas Tatar? And again, I'm repeating myself. If you like him so much, just sign him at the end of the year. He's a free agent. He's a free agent. Lordy. Alvin says, Bergevin is the right dude for the job. Because it's Montreal, they have to make the playoffs every year. And Jeff Molson won't let the organization to rebuild because he will lose money. Absolutely. I hate to say it, but Alvin was here is right. Why do you think, and I remember seeing this on TSN, the experts, quote unquote, they were talking, why do you think it's so hard for Canadian teams to rebuild? They're pressured by the fans to make it to the playoffs every year, right? They're pressured. Why do you think a team like Chicago can rebuild? They don't have that type of pressure. So they can suck for a few years, get Patrick Kane, get Jonathan Toews, get guys like Duncan Keith and Brett Seabrook. They can suck. They won't be pressured by the fans. And then once they have those pieces, then you can make the runs. Then you can win your Stanley Cup in 2010, 2013, and 2015. A modern-day dynasty. What happens if the Montreal Canadiens were to suck ass for 3 years in a row? They would want Bergevin's head on a platter. So that's why it's so hard for Canadian teams to rebuild. I think the last Canadian team to rebuild was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if you recall, that's back when Brendan Shanahan was the GM. He came out and he said, listen, guys, this is going to be a painful process. Okay? We're going to be losing a lot of games, but we are rebuilding. And we are thinking for the future. Now, my dream, my wet dream, would to see Marc Bergevin come up to the podium and say, listen, guys, we are going to suck for 3 to 5 years, but that sacrifice is for the future, where we're going to be a modern-day dynasty. And with those prospects, we would have accumulated over 5 years of sucking ass. We are going to win Stanley Cups with them. And then I wake up and my sheets are all crusty. That is my dream. Why can it not happen? God damn it. Apologize for my language, but it's very frustrating. Especially if nobody buys the tickets. That's the thing, guys. If you want to send a message, send it with your wallet. Don't go to the Molson Center, the Bell Center. Don't go spend a ridiculous price for tickets. Don't spend ridiculous price for beers and stuff. If you want to send a message, send it for your wallet. And that's how they get the message. Joe says, the 2003 draft was great, but I think the most important draft was 2005. The Crosby and Price draft. To me, that's the draft that changed the NHL forever. Crosby and Price, they're great players. They're great players in their own right, but there's one problem with the 2005 NHL draft. And I'm about to pull it out right now, if you guys were to remain patient. The problem for me with the NHL draft, the 2005 NHL draft, is that apart for guys like Price, apart for guys like Crosby, apart for guys like even Kopitar, I think there's a lot of busts. Let's take a look at it as a matter of fact, Joe. Crosby, legendary player. Second overall, Bobby Ryan. Eesh. His career's kind of gone downhill ever since he's been with Ottawa. Part of it is because of hand injuries, but I don't know about Bobby Ryan. I don't know about Jack Johnson. Sorry there, I clicked the wrong fucking button. I'm starting to hate these touchscreens. Anyway. Oh my god, what's happening? Why is it giving me the minutes? Okay. Fifth overall, Carey Price. Oh, I forgot to mention Benoit Pouliot, who's not even playing right now. Gilbert Brule, bust. Jack Skilly, bust. Devin Setoguchi had a decent draft year, but sort of a bust. Brian Lee, bust. Luc Bourdon, rest in peace. Rest in peace. He was supposed to be a good player. Unfortunately, he died in a motorcycle accident. May he rest in peace. Kopitar, great player. Stahl, he's a great player in his own right. Marek Zagrapin, bust. Sasha Pukaluk, bust. Ryan O'Mara, he was an okay player. He actually played for the Canadiens. But, I don't know. Alex Burrett, bust. So, I get what you mean when you say it was a good draft year. But I will say, if the players didn't pan out, they were absolute busts in my opinion. So, I'm not too keen on the 2005 draft. I don't think it was the best draft year. Let's take a look for fun at the 2003 draft. Okay, because again, that's the draft year that everyone is saying it's the best draft year to ever happen. And like I said, I think that a main reason for that is that a lot of the players, they got to go back in junior. They got to benefit from those extra years. They weren't just plunged in the NHL without being ready. So I think that's got a lot to do with it. Let's see right here. All right. First overall, Mark Fleury, future Hall of Famer. Second overall is Eric Stahl, probable future Hall of Famer. He has 1,000+ points, guys. Nathan Horton, his career got derailed by injuries, but he was a decent player when he was playing. Zurdev is a bust. Thomas Vanek, he was good for a good while there with the Sabres. He was a decent player. Milan Michalek, I'm not too sure about him. Ryan Suter, great player, all-star. Braden Coburn, maybe he's not that 8th overall pedigree, but he's a decent player, Braden Coburn. He's a top 6 defenseman, and he gives some decent plays. Dion Phaneuf, I know we like to goof on Fagoof, but hey, those years when he was first with Calgary, he was used as an excellent player. Kostitsyn, we're not going to talk about him. Jeff Carter, maybe a future Hall of Famer. He was a great player. Jesse Min was a bust. Dustin Brown, great player. Brent Seabrook, great player. Nilsson, bust. Bernier, he played decent the years where he did play. Parise, great player. Ryan Getzlaff, Brent Burns, come on, Ryan Kessler, Brian Boyle, Corey Perry. Going down the list here. Oh, man, I love to look at these old draft lists. Shea Weber, 49th overall. Patrice Bergeron, 45th overall. Corey Crawford. There's a lot of decent players here. Jimmy Howard. Going down the list here, there's a lot of decent players. And again, it's viewed as a legendary draft, that 2003 draft. I think the only draft year that might surpass it, that this is the year a lot of people are going to say this is the best draft class, 2015. If you go back to 2015, and I'm not going to go back because I've looked at drafts enough here, but 2015 is going to be great. There's a lot of great players, and later on in the first round, you see guys like Timo Meier, Travis Konechny. Those are incredible players, and to get at those rounds, holy maron. Fedge, he says, how many games will he play in the NCAA? Maybe 32? He needs time in the AHL. Yeah, absolutely. If I'm assuming you're talking about Caulfield here. If they come to the decision, am I going to send you down to the NCAA or to the AHL? I really hope they choose the AHL. Because, first of all, the competition is higher, so it'll get him accustomed to the NHL. Second of all, they play more games, so it'll get that conditioning back on point. Speaking about AHL, though, did you guys see Jesperi Kotkaniemi's points? 3 games played. He has 0 goals. Oh, but don't stop there. 6 assists and 6 penalty minutes. Not a fan of that -2, but I'm not going to pretend like I watched the games, so I don't know what that means. The first game he played, he had a secondary assist. He had 1 assist in that game. And I said to myself, you know what? It's a secondary assist. Now the second game, he got 3 assists. And one of them was a beauty cross-ice pass to, I think it was Charles Hudon. Then the game yesterday that they played, 2 assists. 2 assists. Kotkaniemi is having fun right now in the NHL. AHL, my apologies. And one thing I will say about Kotkaniemi, I was sort of scared that being sent down to the AHL, he would take it the bad way. I love Ryan Poehling, and I still think he's going to be a fabulous player. But when he got sent down to the AHL, he sort of soured. Well, we're not going to lie here. Ryan Poehling was sour. Kotkaniemi, on the other hand, for all of the negatives I give about him, he didn't take it as a punishment. He said, I'm going to be sent down. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to get my confidence back. He just seems like the type of guy that, situations like this, he doesn't take it to heart. He doesn't look like a guy that gets offended that easily. He always has that dumb smile. I like what I see from Kotkaniemi in the AHL. I gotta say. Fedge also says Tatar is also cheap and under control for another year, so 2 firsts. Absolutely. Yeah, under control, do you mean he's signed an extra year? Because I thought his contract ended this year. Let me take a look. Hold on, guys. Maybe Fedge, if you can clarify that. Thomas Tatar contract. All right. By the way, guys, if you don't know HockeyDB, it's an absolutely gorgeous website. I absolutely love it. Oh, shit. He signed until 2021. Oh, my apologies. For some reason in my head, I thought he was signed until the end of the year. No, he signed an extra year after that, so thanks for bringing that to mind. Yeah, he can absolutely give 2 first overalls, without a doubt. Maya says, a kitchen sink wouldn't do much for a hockey team. Hey, who knows, the players that can wash themselves between periods? I would take a kitchen sink, you know. Fidgehead says, it can't happen because they traded Roy, and Colorado went on to become the team of the 90s. Yeah, maybe. I think you're talking about in reference to trading Carey Price. Fedge also says, you would trade Caulfield for Kopitar because we both know Mark Bergevin is not going to rebuild. Would I trade Caulfield for Kopitar? No. I think that Caulfield projects to be better than Kopitar in the future. But even in the short term, I don't know if Montreal has the team to even make it to the playoffs. So what's the use of adding Kopitar? It's like as if the Ottawa Senators were to add Kopitar right now. Everyone would scratch their heads. Imagine if the Senators traded, I don't know, Eric Brandstrom for Kopitar. Even if Kopitar is the better player, why do that move? You're not making the playoffs. You're absolutely not making the playoffs, so why make that move? I just realized I had it on the wrong screen, by the way, guys. My bad. Leaky Bum says, best draft year was 2003. The best rookie class was 2005. Due to the lockout, and merged with the 2004 draft with Ovi, Malkin, and the others. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Let's see. Fedge says, I'm hearing rumors that KK's dad is showing signs of Chucky's dad. Oh boy. I don't know if that's true, and I'll tell you why. Chucky's dad lived near the team. I think he lived in Montreal with Chucky. Maybe not in the same house, but I think he lived in Montreal. He went to the games frequently. KK's dad, not only does he live in Finland, but he's coaching a Finnish team. So it strikes me as very doubtful that he's over and watching the Montreal Canadiens closely, watching their practice and telling KK what to do. He might be doing that. You know, I might be wrong, but hey, who knows? Okay, but it doesn't strike me that way. The only thing I heard about Kotkaniemi that people were a little bit, I would say, disappointed about is the fact that at the end of last year, he trained in Finland. The Montreal Canadiens wanted him to train in Montreal with their trainers. You know, trainers, they're people who know what they're doing. Kotkaniemi said, no, I'm going to go train on my own back in Finland. I guarantee you that's not going to happen this year. I'm sorry, Kotkaniemi. No Finland for you this summer. You're going to be training in Montreal with the trainers. That's something I didn't really like. Because he did put on some mass. Kotkaniemi did. The training wasn't all for nothing. But the trainers in Montreal know what they're doing. They're experts. I would have liked to see him trade in Montreal. Alvin says Tatar can bring so much more value to the team if he gets traded. And I agree. Alvin who's here says, who in their right mind wants Kopitar? He is nearing 35 with that contract. Yeah, true. And he's not having that type of year a couple of years back when he was nominated for the Hart, so that's one thing. Fedge says he had Kotkaniemi out last week running drills with him. Oh, okay, so I see what you're talking about. Yeah, I guess there's sort of shades of Chucky's dad. I hope it doesn't get as bad as with Chucky's dad. I don't think it's on that level yet. But then again, I'm not behind closed doors, so I'm not able to tell you whether or not, okay? I would assume that means that he's not coaching the team anymore in Finland. Maybe he's not doing that. And Alvin says, I guarantee you that's not happening this year. All right. With that being said, on that lovely expression there, I think I'm going to close it out. We've been going on for about an hour here. And I appreciate all of you guys coming out. Alvin, Fedge, Leaky Bum, Maya, Joe, if you're still here, Areem, Max, all of you guys. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for chatting. If you like talking about Montreal Canadiens and you want to continue, make sure to check out the Discord server where you can shit post. Like, look, I'm about to write shit. You see, I just wrote shit. If you guys want to talk about Canadiens and want to talk about hockey, this is the place to do it. Otherwise, make sure to like and subscribe to this video. I appreciate all of you guys coming out. And again, make sure to share this with your friends. If you guys want to be, you want the channel to grow, you want to be a part of it, make sure to share it. And make sure to follow me on Twitter at thesinbin1996. On behalf of me and on behalf of everyone here, I would like to wish you a very nice Sunday. And without further ado, my name is Matt. Keep your stick on the ice.